Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Lori, and welcome to Universally Unique, exploring the neurodiverse world of the extraordinary. This podcast fosters curiosity and understanding about neurodiversity while empowering individuals with tools for acceptance and inclusion in classrooms, the workplace, and communities. Featuring shared stories of neurodiverse life experiences, it sheds light on navigating a world not designed for diversity. Universally Unique starts now. Hi, this is Dr. Lori. My guest today is Bill Roland, who is the Director of Special Education in one of the school districts in the state of Connecticut. But as we normally do, we're going to start with some deep breaths before we jump into Bill's experiences in the field of special education. So we'll do 3 box breaths. I'll count us while we do that. So we're going to breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, and go again. So breathe in, 3, 2, 1, hold, 3, 2, 1, breathe out, 3, 2, 1, hold, 3, 2, 1, breathe in, 3, 2, 1, hold, 3, 2, 1, breathe out, 3, 2, 1, hold, 3, 2, 1, breathe in, 3, 2, 1, hold, 3, 2, 1, breathe out, 3, 2, 1, hold, 3, 2, 1, and a nice sigh. So, the end of a workday, I suspect that was hopefully helpful for you. So, Bill, the first question that I'd like to start with is to have folks sort of tell me their journey. So what I'm going to ask you to do is tell us kind of how you got into the field of special education, and kind of how that's progressed. I know you've been in it for a bit, so maybe you'll share with us a couple of stops that you've made along the way.
Sure. I was not trained as a special education teacher to start with. I was a history social studies guy, but I always was both the kid as a student and as the adult who was the helper, and always found that I was helping other kids. In third grade, I had a reading group. Um, and it just I was always that kid, that guy. And in trying to find a teaching job, history and social studies was not happening. And through working in mental health and nonprofits, I found my way to ACES, which is a regional educational service center in Connecticut, where I became a special education teacher under temporary certification, and just found I loved it. I connected with kids. Everything that is part of me, I connected with, um, and spent the next couple of years at that, getting my certification and working with kids with emotional disabilities in a small behavior program. And from there, I was recruited to go to New Haven to be at Wilbur-Cross High School, where I spent the better part of the next 15 years teaching high school special education. And again, my journey has always been, how can I help?
Mhm.
What can I do? What kids that need support, whether it's emotional, academic, those things, it always came naturally to me. Through that, I found my way into administration, where I felt I could make a bigger difference helping departments, and find my way through department chair to supervisor and now to director. But really, the heart of my philosophy has always been kind of, how can I help? And whether it was a classroom or any sort of gathering in education, I was that guy. So that's kind of my 30-second, or not, maybe not so 30-second, but elevator version of my career the last 25, 30 years.
Well, I think oftentimes the students that have emotional challenges are the ones that most teachers feel like they have the least ability to be with. So I think that it's wonderful that that was a group that you were drawn to. That's kind of that that's where my heart sits as well. The more complicated things are from an emotional perspective, perhaps mental health perspective, the more likely it is that I'm going to be drawn to that group of individuals. So you've been in a few different positions and you've been slowly moving your way up, and now you are at the top of the special ed responsibilities, so to speak, in the district that you're in. So if you could just give us a little overview of what it is that you do in that position, what it is maybe that you wish that you could be doing in that position, and then kind of maybe we'll talk about where we think the future is going for students that have special education needs.
Sure. And the journey I spoke of has become a case of increasing responsibilities. So I always feel like I'm still a teacher. I'm just in a different role. So going from classroom teacher to department chair to supervisor to director, I'm now sort of the person responsible for how special education is delivered and rolled out and putting in to put some buzzwords in structures and systems and how things like interventions work, how referral systems work. But at the heart of all of these things, looking at the needs of the kids, what do we have that we do well? What do we need that we're either not doing well or not doing at all? And trying to find um, sort of areas of service delivery or really just help and support of what kids from elementary through high school and through transition into adulthood need in order for them to be successful, to feel connected, and to feel part of their school, their community, and just life in general. So for me, it's developing budgets, working with supervisors, working with teachers, working with principals, but really staying connected with kids by visiting the schools in my district and making sure that I'm visible and that I can see things in action that I can either help or coach or connect with. And again, the buzz in teaching is connecting with kids. So if I maintain that, everything else kind of flows from that.
Yeah. I know when I was preparing teachers and administrators, I would tell them the most important thing that they needed to be able to do was build relationships. If you didn't have a relationship, it didn't matter how much other information you had and how many, what great lesson plan you had or what wonderful
Doesn't matter.
curriculum you had.
Nope.
It doesn't work because you're not making those connections.
And if you're
So
connecting with kids, you can teach them anything. And that's sort of the heart
I
of how things should go. So
Yeah. I think there have been a number of changes in education over the course of time that you've been part of the teaching profession, some of which I think are probably have been good, some of which maybe were not so good. So do you have anything in particular that sort of stands out in your mind of, wow, this was great that this happened. I think this was really helpful for teachers, students, parents, everybody involved, and maybe some things that maybe you're seeing that you wish you weren't seeing.
yeah, I think over the course of my career, I've seen expansion of special education disability labels so that there's more dyslexia became a category that was separated out from learning disability. I also think the transition ages that were when I first got into this, it was you got transition supports until you were 21, and then it became 22, and now it's the year in which you turn 22, so you could inevitably have a service plan until you're 23. And that I think I've always been a high school guy. That's been my area of focus. But to get folks and kids from that age 18 upwards through adulthood, working with DDS and working with adult agencies to try to make sure that those programs continue or there's some form of them in adulthood is probably the heart of what I really enjoy. I think things that I'm not crazy about. And again, we could go back to No Child Left Behind 20 years ago and other legislation that's been passed or places where legislation is designed to help, but inevitably creates unfunded mandates or creates more minefields for practitioners to try to make their way through. Um, Things that are a challenge, I think sometimes there's an overemphasis on legality. And again, not that anybody wants to break the law or uh, go outside of what kids need, but I think sometimes the focus gets off of working with kids and onto making sure that all of the items in an IEP are worded correctly or that the phrases are done correctly. Um, the goals and objectives are written in such a way. And there's a part of me that says, do what you do as a teacher, and the goals and objectives will flow easily, and you won't have to worry about how they're worded. So I think, I think every special education director would tell you that the emphasis on um, legal concerns kind of takes away from being able to build programs sometimes and create new and innovative challenges and programs for kids.
Yeah, I I agree. I mean, there's time and a place for crossing the T's and dotting the I's, but when that's all folks are spending all their energy on, they're not spending enough energy on directly providing services and educating children. So then that takes away from the the whole point of
Of
what it
special
is
education, right?
that we're
Right.
doing. Are you finding that teachers within the general education environment are better prepared and more willing to have some of these students in their classroom, or have things maybe stayed about the same for the time that you've been in the field?
The cop out answer is it varies from teacher to teacher, but I will say that I've always found that there are general education teachers that want help and answers and support, like how do I reach this kid? What
Hmm.
should I do? And are looking for special education teachers to consult on that and show me what that looks like. And I think sometimes it's like two lanes of traffic. The general education teacher wants that help and support. The special education teacher, and I am and was one of them, can sometimes think that let me do this. I've got this. Let me come into your classroom. I'll work with them. But I don't know that that's the conversation that should be happening. I think sometimes as special education teachers, we are seen as the experts in this, and we are. But really to change that model from us providing it to let me show you how it's done, let me be there, but let me transfer that responsibility over to you. And some general education teachers love that and want that. Others, I think, worry that they're doing it right or that they're not doing enough or that they may be doing too much. So
Yeah.
I think sometimes the conversation that needs to happen on the classroom level is something that can be built through culture in the building, through principals and administrators and things like that. But I think there's a desire on Gen Ed to want to do more around differentiation. There's always going to be teachers who are not as well versed in that, or maybe don't want to be, or are worried about what that looks like in their classroom. And I think there's special education teachers that would rather do it themselves. The perfect marriage there is if everybody sort of drops the persona and becomes collaborative, and that would be inclusion. But again, that speaks to staffing, resources, time, and budgets.
Yeah. I mean, the best of it is I agree with you. It tends to be, like a marriage, it's a partnership. There's give and there's take, and both parties have to be willing to participate and bring to the table what it is that they have. As a special educator myself, there's certain things I don't know anything about. So I'm not going to try to walk into, I don't know, a chemistry classroom and try to tell the teacher how to teach
Right.
chemistry, but I probably know how to reach the kid that's in their class. And when we put our two skills together, really good stuff happens. But we have to be able to work together. And that's, I think, sometimes a challenge. It goes back to that relationships piece. The teachers need the relationships with each other just as much as they need them with the students.
And that is sometimes special education teachers will say, and I was one of them about chemistry. I don't know anything about chemistry. Well, I'm not there for the chemistry. I'm there to help the student understand the content in a way that I can explain maybe better or differently than the gen ed teacher who was very content driven.
Yeah.
So that's where that balance should take place.
Yeah. It's not everyone needs to fly the plane. There's other people that are part of the plane being able to fly and recognizing that everybody makes a contribution for that to happen. Um, what do you think about the future of special education services at this point? There's been, you know, things that have come up since the new administration has come into our federal government about getting rid of the Department of Ed, which is really the primary place that folks, all the checks and balances for kids with disabilities sit in the Department of Education. They're the ones who make sure that that law is followed. Do you think that it will work for it to be spread out amongst other places?
You know, and again, it's probably going to be a cop-out answer, but I almost think it's too early to tell. However, I do think that the structures that were in place from the delivery of IDEA funds and the grants and that from the federal government to the states to the local boards of ed, that's almost a sacred trust, and that can't be messed with, even if the idea is to, not to, no pun intended, to maybe streamline or to maybe try to make it more effective or to try to find different ways where this could be perhaps a better option. I just haven't heard a lot of conversation around that. In Connecticut, we've had the Special Education Task Force, which was a lot of, you know, practitioners from superintendents, special ed directors down to teachers trying to figure out where special ed is going. And I always think that it's never going to contract. If anybody's looking for specialized instruction or special education services to contract, it's not going to happen. IDEA has been around for 50 years, and whether those it's not you, but the greater population likes it or doesn't like it, it's always expanded because the needs have expanded,
Yeah.
in terms of labeling or identifying. And I also think going back to my earlier point, it's again, special education isn't contracting, it's expanding. And I think it's going to expand more into the adult world. I mean, we talking about it going from age 21 to 22 to 23. I can see a time where it might even be upwards of age 25 or larger and starting partnering with colleges
Yeah.
more on that end. Um, and I do think there needs to be a structure in place from the federal level to mind this and monitor it and structure it so that there isn't disparity from Connecticut to Florida to Arkansas to Maine to California, where that's what the federal government is designed to do, to make sure that yes, states have power, but you can't treat kids in Connecticut differently than you can in Texas or Idaho. And I'm trying to think of states where I'm trying to
Name
not,
all the states you can
name
think
all
of,
out there,
right?
50 shots at it. But I think
Yeah.
there's an equity issue that the federal government is designed to corral.
Yeah.
Um, that it worries me if that structure isn't in place, and what does that look like? And I don't know where that heads.
Yeah. I think one of our advantages in the state of Connecticut is overall services for children with special needs is some of the best. Uh,
Exactly. Yes.
and there are places that kids are, definitely not getting that level of services. And that law, that Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is really meant to protect everybody in all 50 states. I do think that there's lots of details here that need to be worked out. I think there are a lot of families that are afraid that their children are going to lose services, but hopefully those
Yes.
folks are going to speak up as they did when the law was first passed in 1975.
Correct.
That's how we got that law to start with. It was parents pushing for their kids to be able to get an education. And they're going to have to start speaking up
And
again.
they are the strongest voice.
Yeah,
What teachers can speak, administrators can speak, but parents raising the issue, parents are the voters, and they can be the largest voice that changes the
yeah,
perception of what's
yeah.
needed.
I think you're right on the money though of thinking about the fact that we need to be paying attention to what happens after folks are finished with school too. A lot of my career has been spent with individuals that are not school age, and folks are gonna be not school age a whole lot longer than they're gonna be
Yes.
from, birth to 22 or 23. And the better we are at helping them build those adult skills, the better things are going to be on the other side. The potential for them to have, paid and meaningful employment goes up. The potential for them to live, independently or semi-independently is really critical. And there's a huge need in the adult services area right now. There's there's thousands of people who probably should be moving out of their parents' homes for a whole variety of reasons, some of
Hmm.
which the fact is their parents are very, very elderly, and there's no place for them to go.
Right.
And so I think there's a whole side of that needs to be um, addressed. So tell me a little bit more about you specifically. What professional achievements are you most proud of?
Is this where I talk about my impending doctorate? Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is something I'm very proud of, and it's taken a long time, but I'm on the edge of earning my EDD uh, in May. That's probably my proudest educational achievement. At one point in my career, I was happy to just get a job, and be able to be in a classroom. But I think as you move on in your career, um, that's something where I feel like I'm actually, I'm working on um, multi-tiered systems of support or intervention systems before special education referrals take place, and how special education directors feel about that and perspectives. And not to toot my own horn, but I feel like this is something that's actually a practical project that can maybe do some good in terms of how each district looks at what we do for kids before it turns into an IEP or before it becomes a special education referral. What can we do? How can we collaborate between general ed and special ed, as we spoke about before? So that's my probably my proudest achievement professionally is that. Second is becoming a director, because that's sort of the peak of within special education, of being able to say that you are the person who is responsible for the supports in any district that you're in. So,
Yeah, that's a big responsibility. And I think one that less and less people are willing to take on. So I am confident that the folks in the district that you're in are very, very grateful for your willingness to do that. And the whole idea of the multi-tiered systems of support is prevention. And even if folks don't know anything at all about education and preventative measures in education, we know about those things in our personal lives. We know that, if we eat a healthy diet and we don't smoke and we get exercise and we go for the, whatever testing is appropriate at your age group, you can get out ahead of things and prevent them. And I think, prevention is something that as an educational system, we have not been super awesome about, even though there was a whole area of it that's really meant to try to get in there as soon as possible. My very first job was with birth to three. I worked with babies and parents in their homes. It was a really wonderful thing to get in there that early and hopefully put them on a different path. But we really do need to figure out how to get better at sort of stopping the train before it goes in a direction that we don't want it to go. So tell me what it is that you do though to sort of revitalize, restore, to so that you have the energy to carry out the responsibilities that you have.
well, I'm not a I don't know how, I'm a very much a homebody. Spending time with my wife and daughter, who's a freshman. My daughter's a freshman in college right now, and so that's always valuable. But in terms of stuff that I love, I've always been a music nerd. So it's reading takes me away, and reading for pleasure has always been a companion to me. Uh, Technology involved in that. And things that sort of enrich my brain that aren't work related.
Hmm.
Things that, finding a new band or a new album or revisiting stuff that I love that I haven't listened to in a while, or rereading a book that I haven't read in a while, or just searching out stuff that's going to feed my brain that frankly ha may not have anything directly to do with special education, but will give my brain the food that it needs in order to focus on what I need to focus on when I am working.
Yeah. I think as a whole, many teachers and educators and educational administrators are terrible at doing some of those restore and renew kinds of things. I think as a society, we're starting to recognize how critical that is and how important it is. So to take those few hours a week and do that makes you better at what you do the rest of the time, as opposed to, I suspect maybe you did this when you first started working. I don't know. I thought a 16-hour day was a walk in the park.
And
That's what you just did. I practically lived at my job.
and
Uh,
taking work home with you or not being able to strike that work-life balance, because if it's out of
exactly.
balance, neither side is going to be good
No,
for you.
no,
Work will not be
nobody's getting,
successful and life will not be successful.
no. And that, it kind of goes back to the prevention piece is when you don't take the time to sort of, rebuild your reserves, then so usually that's when things start to kind of happen. Um, how do you see us kind of encouraging more folks to consider becoming special education teachers? And it's a shortage area. It's a big issue. It has been a shortage area, I think, I don't know, probably for the entire time that I've been a professional. But I think a lot of folks sort of steer away from it and don't recognize how much of an impact they can have on students and how rewarding it can be.
I think that those who are going into the teaching profession need to know that special education may be the most interesting, challenging area to work in, because if you're an effective teacher, you'll be an effective special education teacher, and vice versa. A lot of the things about differentiation, I always used to say to gen ed teachers, you're already doing a lot of stuff that's in the IEP. You may not realize you're doing it. So I would say to people that are considering teaching as a career, consider special education because it is rewarding, it's challenging, it's not always sunshine and rainbows, but you always feel like you have purpose and that you went into the right area as a teacher.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And I should probably clarify for some of our listeners that an IEP is an individualized education
Alphabet soup. I gotta watch
plan
myself.
that students with disabilities get a very specific plan, one that I personally think all students should have some version of, because I think all students have individual needs that need to be addressed. But Bill, we could talk probably forever about providing services to such an array of individuals. I mean, there's such a vast difference of all the different types of individuals that you come across as a special educator. I think it keeps one on their toes and always learning and always interested. I appreciate you taking the time to spend this time with me. And I look forward to hearing more about how things are going in your district in the future. We will bring you back if there's some new and exciting things going
I
going
would love
on.
to.
A half hour is ne I say this every single time that I do a podcast. Half hour is never enough. I don't know how folks do a half hour podcast and fit in all the things that they want to talk about. But
Well,
uh,
I thank you for the opportunity, and I love the conversation. As you know, I'm not shy in retiring, so I love to talk. So anytime we want to do this again, I'm happy to do it.
Okay, I appreciate your willingness to return. So we may start having like return guests and sort of check back in with them at a future point in time. But thank you very much. And thank you to all of our listeners for spending this time with us. And we will hopefully see you again in a couple of weeks. Thank you for listening to Universal Unique, exploring the neurodiverse world of the extraordinary. Join me, Dr. Lori, on Transformation Talk Radio every second and fourth Monday at 11:30 Pacific Time as we continue to explore navigating a world not designed for diversity. For advocacy and support for individuals with disabilities, let's connect. Learn more about consulting and life coaching at notoholisticconsulting.com.